Hey everybody, this is Devin Francis, also known as Leonard Meltzner.
And I totally called what was gonna happen in this episode early on, and Devin didn't.
And you're watching episode 96 of the Adventures in Odyssey Oddcast. What are we talking about today, Victoria?
We're talking about Jerry. We're talking about
In what specific instances?
the boat people. And
Boat People Part 1.
I can't remember what the other one is. Parker for President?
No, because that's in album 61, Victoria. What episode will we talk about regarding the Vietnam War in the Boat People?
Oh, Memories of Jerry.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like there was not a connection at all. It was total coincidence that these were selected together. So,
Yep.
Boat People, Part 1, Episode 795, written by Phil Lawler. What happens in this episode, Victoria?
You might have to help me with this. I don't know if I can do a lot without coughing uncontrollably. So, can you summarize this one?
Sure. So there is a new kid in Odyssey, and his name is Ricky Chang, and he is going to be on a kids' radio series that Connie is producing, where kids talk about their family history. And so Whit has just come back from a trip, and so Renee and Ricky are telling him about his story, and he shows him this ring that is part of his history, and he's like, "Huh, I am suddenly really emotionally conflicted at the presence of this ring. I need to go take a walk about it," as you can see in the album art. And then Ricky just... Sorry?
I didn't notice the ring in the album art before.
I'll put it up here. On the web quest, there was it talked about Gary Locke's intentionality behind the art, which was to have the three of them in there, Renee and Ricky and Whit, and Ricky is clearly telling a story to Renee, and Whit is distracted by the ring, but not just distracted, but he's very clearly emotionally focused and weighed down by something to do with the ring, but also intentionally the fact that Renee and Ricky are not noticing what Whit is experiencing. Anyways, so Ricky tells the story on kids' radio of what happened to his family, or the beginning of the story, and how his parents and older siblings and grandmother immigrated from Vietnam after the communists took over. And so it's hard, and they get on a boat, and there's lots of people, and then pirates show up, and that's the end of part 1. And Whit reveals it has something to do with Jerry, because the ring that Ricky's family had that his grandmother got from a soldier is Whit's own ring. So that's what happens.
Yep.
So, from the top...
There was this one scene, and it reminded me so strongly of a scene from Terminator 2. It was crazy. Which, you haven't seen Terminator 2.
I haven't. I should, because everyone talks like it's the best Terminator film.
There's this one scene where Sarah Connor has a dream where she sees all these kids and playing on a playground, and she sees John playing on the playground, and it's her twin sister, but it's supposed to be her playing with John, and then all of a sudden Judgment Day happens, and then this huge explosion happens, and then
There's Arnold Schwarzenegger Jesus, and he comes through and he brings everyone back to life.
No. Sarah's clutching the fence because she's screaming for John, and then but she's silent and stuff, and then you see her flesh melt off and stuff in the explosion. But it reminded me of the dream that the lady had, where it's just she was surrounded by people, then all of a sudden they were just all dead, and I was like, this is that one part from Terminator. But not, and...
Jesus comes by to touch the people, and he, T-1000 melts his hand off, and it, reanimates.
He's
yeah. That is absolutely what happened in the Easter story when the Romans put Jesus to death by throwing him into molten level, and he just
on the
gave
cross.
A thumbs up on Friday. But then...
Gosh.
On Sunday, when he kicked the safe wall door down, and he was back. That's exactly how it happened. So, from the top of the episode, Renee. We opened with Renee, and we knew that she was going to be in this episode, but it's just really exciting that she's back and she's going to be around, and hopefully she'll show up in subsequent public albums. Because
like I said,
that's what
in the last one. What?
I said apparently because that's what we're calling them now, public albums. That's what I call them, at least, because I don't know what else to say.
I just call them by their numbers. I say the numbered albums. Like I said before, I didn't know if Renee was going to be in more episodes or not, and she was in this, so I was super happy about that.
So when Renee is like, kids research their family when Renee's like, kids research their family history and tell it in story form, and Whit's like, that's a great idea. I'm sure internally he's like, man, I should use the imagination station to go back in time and meet my ancestors. I'm sure that nothing could go wrong at all.
He's like, I lost one ring, I need another one to fill the void.
And then he sees this ring and he's like, rings, family history, this is all reminding me of something.
Maybe it'd remind me of if I could actually see the ring.
It was really weird to hear Whit so out of touch with everything that's going on for him to come back, and they're like, oh, well, this is happening, here's this new fun-loving, precocious 10-year-old that you haven't met.
I don't know about you, but I think this whole family kids radio thing is gonna be like a one-shot.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Thing. Especially since it's the OAC. Either way, I wouldn't expect to ever hear from it again. So, the ring says Relay on it, and it has a unicorn. I'm like, okay, now I see why people said that this connects to Whit's backstory now. Someone said that a while ago. I'm like, okay, this is coming together. It said on the WebQuest stuff that it was a high school ring, like a class ring. Which
they said that in the episode too.
Did they say it was a class ring? Okay.
Yeah, they did.
So now that we know that it is Whit's ring specifically, I guess that means that Whit went to high school in Relay. He was still living there when he graduated. So that's a new piece about Whit's past that we just learned. He didn't live in Chicago at the time. I was thinking
that the ring was either Whit's or it was Harold's.
Same. I thought it was Harold's.
To Jerry. I knew that, like, okay, it was Jerry's. Like, 2 minutes in, I sent a message to Devin when I was listening to this. He hadn't heard it yet, and I was like, hey, you know how we hadn't decided what month to put Memories of Jerry with? Let's do it this month. And Devin's like, oh yeah, I heard that it has to do with Vietnam, so okay. Never made the connection at all until the end of the episode when Whit blatantly said the name Jerry.
So, Victoria and I already talked about my ineptitude.
We talked about it a little bit.
We talked about my ineptitude previously.
Yeah.
So, during the listening to the episode, I totally, the Vietnam connection to Whit's family just fell out my ear completely.
Every single time I hear the word Vietnam, just in everyday life, I'm like, Jerry Whittaker.
Me too, except for here, apparently.
Are you serious?
But, because, I mean, here's the thing, okay? The first thing that led me, I probably would have thought it was Jerry's, except for this. We hear, the first thing we hear about the ring is that Ricky's grandmother got it from a soldier. And so I pictured that his story about his family past was probably going to be some romance between, or something to do with, like, his grandmother as a young girl or as a young woman and a soldier. And I'm like, well, his grandmother's probably really old, so this soldier, like, this would have happened a long time ago. So I was like, and you also have to think, class ring from Relay, Jerry would have never lived there from,
yeah, I know, that's why I thought it was like Whit's or Harold's, and they gave it to Jerry.
Exactly, and a unicorn emblem, which means Scotland, where Jerry's never been. I was like, okay, unicorn and Relay, maybe Whit, but most likely, class ring, school, Relay, well, who was a professor at Relay University and lived in Scotland for most of his life? Harold Whittaker. Maybe Harold was the soldier that gave the ring, because that was a really long time ago, and his grandmother's probably really old, so they'd both be youngish at the same time, despite the fact that I realized afterwards, no, they wouldn't, because Whit would have maybe been the same age, because Whit is like 92 or 94 or whatever. Yeah, exactly. I always forget how old Whit is.
When I was re-listening to the episode, I was actually thinking, like, maybe it's not Jerry. And then I was like, wait, no, I know it's Jerry, because Yeah, when I was re-listening to it, it felt a little bit less likely that it was Jerry's, but then I was like, no, I know for a fact that this is Jerry's ring because they say so at the end of the episode.
In my mind,
so
I was kind of put into, because of the whole grandmother thing, I was put into the mental paradigm of this happened a really long time ago, and in my mind, the Vietnam War was not a really long time ago, and so I was like, well, that's way too recent, and so it had to be like Wit somehow, or Harold or something like that, someone farther back generationally from Wit.
Jerry's old.
Yeah.
Like, he's the oldest kid. Jason's old, and he's the youngest.
Yeah.
How old is Monty? I listened to the Green Ring Conspiracy yesterday.
It's a great question.
Like, the whole thing, and I was trying to figure out how old Monty was. Is he, like, 20?
He's probably in his mid-20s, early 20s.
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, when you think about it.
Connie is, like, 33 or whatever right now. Whatever age they're going with.
Who knows?
And I was thinking, like, oh, that doesn't make sense for Monty to be that old. And I realized Connie's 16 at the beginning. Monty's probably, like 9.
10 or something, yeah.
9 or 10. So they have, like, not a big age gap between them when you actually think about it. So Monty's probably, like, if Connie's 33, then Monty's probably, like, 25, 27.
Yeah, I'd say like Monty and Connie are probably, like, early 20s and late 20s, respectively. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, Jerry would have been like 19 in this episode, and that happened in the 70s at some point. Because
he like went straight out when he was recruited from high school.
Well, he was in. Oh wait, it was school, wasn't it? I was gonna say college, but yeah.
And Plato went to Canada.
So that means that, I mean, the Vietnam War happened like 40-ish years ago, so Jerry would have been like 60 if he was still alive right now. Jerry would almost be old enough to retire at this point, which just shows how old Wit is.
Wit's old enough to retire like 5 times by this point. Anyways,
back to not memories of Jerry, because we're not there yet. So Wit is like really affected by this story, and I couldn't, I wasn't putting these connections together. He's like, oh, so you're a boat person, and this boat, and the ring, and he's like sitting there like rolling in the fetal position, and Renee and Ricky are completely unaware of it. I didn't really have a lot to say about the story itself that Ricky was telling. I really appreciated the depictions of just how incredibly harsh life is for immigrants, and especially refugees. And I assume in the second part we'll see how difficult things continue to be after immigration, because of the way that first world countries usually treat immigrants, and especially political refugees.
I love all the representation that Odyssey's been getting lately. And you also see it
like geographically from the OC, you mean?
Yeah, and also in like the town of Odyssey now. Like we're getting more characters from around the world in Odyssey.
Yeah, it's nice.
And another one comes in the new album, but I'm not going to say who. Devin hasn't listened to that episode yet. You don't know them yet. It's just a new character.
I know. Stop.
Yeah. And so I just really like it, and I just like how they're all depicted a lot.
Yeah, so I mean, the story itself, I just really appreciate it. I feel like there's this narrative about refugees of like, oh, they're poor terrorists, or they're just coming to like mooch off our generosity because they can't make it in their old country. And it's always amazing to me to hear stories, especially being in Vancouver. It's like there are a lot of people who are first and second generation immigrants, and it's always amazing to me the things that parents have to go through in that process of immigration. And one of the things is realizing like how much they leave behind. Like so many people who are rich and successful, they have lots of property or money or really high influential jobs, and just have to start from ground zero, from scratch. I always see online so many stories of, people in the US and Canada who are immigrants, and they're homeless or they're janitors or things like that. And they're like, well, back in my country, I was a surgeon, or I was a university professor here, and now I empty trash cans, because you come to a new country and it's like none of that stuff counts now. Got to start over. And so I felt like that this was a really good showing of that. Like these people, like they ran this large company, they had a whole plantation and all of these things. And technically they didn't leave it through the immigration, they left it because the communists took it away. But still it's clear like, they had all of this money and the jewelry and stuff that they all had to give up in order to make that trek and just arrive with nothing left because they had to spend it all just to get there. And like I said, I assume in the second part we'll see more of the difficulties that they face upon arriving, both, financially and getting jobs and stuff, and also, discrimination, distrust, and all of that.
I had to listen to this one twice because the first time I was so shocked about everything with Jerry that once I figured out 2 minutes in that Jerry was
I get it, Victoria. It took me until the war memorial.
No, I'm not talking about you. For me, it was just like I figured out Jerry was going to be in it, and then the rest of the episode was just white noise until Whit said Jerry's name at the end, so I just didn't hear anything else. So I had to listen to it again.
Yeah. So, speaking of the war memorial, it's been a really good long while since we visited it, and hearing Whit talk about how it's been many years since
the war hero, hasn't it?
Sorry?
Since the war hero?
No, I mean, in Darkness Before Dawn, it gets defaced and stuff, and I'm sure there's more stuff since then. Surely. And
we've also reviewed the first episode that
right, that's what I was going to say. It's so weird because it's been many years now since it was erected, and I'm like, it's weird because it's such like a staple location in Odyssey. It's really weird to remember that it was actually in an episode of the present day when it was first unveiled way back in The Price of Freedom.
That's not weird for me to think about, but okay.
And as I was writing this here, it's right here, I'm like, when it was first revealed way back in The Price of Freedom, and I just got whose ring it is. So that's how long it took me to figure it out. And I'm like, okay.
And I just figured it out.
I wrote that in there. I'm like, okay, now this is really intriguing. Now I see how it's all... And then Whit's like, it's my ring.
Oh, I understand.
Shut up. And then Whit's like, it's my ring. And I was like, oh, that's how it can be Jerry's, because he gave it to him. I assumed that it originally belonged to the soldier. Like, it didn't occur to me that you could give the ring to someone else. And so that's why I was like, well, it can't be Jerry, because Relay in Scotland. And also, why would the ring have a unicorn on it if it's from Relay? Unless, do people, like, personalize their class rings? Because Relay's in North Carolina, so why would it be connected to Scotland?
I don't know, maybe like their mascot's a unicorn or something.
Maybe, but then that would just be a coincidence having nothing to do with the fact that Whit is
I wondered if Scotland. It was like Whit's family crest or something like that.
But did they... Because class rings, as far as I'm aware, do not exist in this country. I hear about them on TV, usually set in the 50s, when it's like, oh, he gave her his class ring, it's so romantic, they're going to wear their Letterman jackets and go up on Makeout Point or whatever. I don't really know what they are. I always just assumed when you graduate in the 50s in the US that everyone got this ring. I don't know. Maybe they can be personalized with unicorns. It also, I think wasn't until either this episode or just around the same day when Austin Peachy posted this poster on Facebook that was like, John Avery Whittaker for President 2016. And I was like, I always forget that Whit is technically an immigrant too. Because he was not born in the US.
Yes, you can get personalized class rings.
Okay.
You can get them at Walmart.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't know if it's a regular thing for you to personalize it when you're getting your ring in high school or whatever.
I don't know, but you can get them personalized.
I was thinking about it because I saw the poster. It's like Whit for president, and I was like, I guess Whit couldn't be because I'm pretty sure you can't be if you're not born in the U.S. And Whit is an immigrant.
Connie for president.
So, the video documentary has a short video from World Vision, which explains their process of helping villages, which is listening to their needs, devising an action plan to fill them, acting on that plan, relying as much as they can on doing it through the local resources and people and economy, which is always important, and then training the locals to be able to upkeep those systems in a self-sustaining manner. The beginning part of it, when they're like, we need to listen to their needs to know what they want and then fulfill them, all I could think of was the boy who didn't go to church. And the body. And they're like, we need to listen to him. And then there was also a World Vision bit So that is obviously the charity for this month. And apparently World Vision will come into play in the second part. I didn't realize they were that old of an organization, to be honest. There was another video bit about this 13-year-old girl named Silin in the Dominican Republic, talking about her life and what World Vision has done for their village and how she's involved with it and stuff. And they talked about how Ricky's VA is Arlo, the main character in The Good Dinosaur.
Oh my gosh.
Which I haven't seen.
That movie.
But Victoria has seen.
That movie's so weird. Oh my gosh.
It's funny because they're like, Ricky's VA was the main character in the Pixar animated feature film, and I was like, oh wow, this is really big. I wonder what amazing Pixar film was.
And they're like, The Good Dinosaur, and you're like, never mind.
I didn't realize The Good Dinosaur was Pixar, to be honest.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
It's like their first really big flop. That's why it's...
Well, that's why I didn't realize. I didn't think it was possible for a Pixar film to flop, except for, of course, Cars 2.
Yeah.
There's, which I also haven't seen.
I haven't. One time I was really bored, and I put it on,
I haven't.
And I got like 30 seconds in before I realized I'm not this desperate to be entertained, and I turned it off.
There's also the recording. I like how basically every video documentary now has like a behind-the-scenes recording clip of a scene. So this one had a recording of the scene where they're first deciding that they need to leave Vietnam, and they're arguing about it. And it talks about how half of the OAC's donations toward World Vision for this month of July, which it is, we're almost caught up. We're actually really close.
Yeah, I know.
I realized this the other day.
Are you happy about that?
There's only a month left at this rate, and we'll be caught up.
Are you happy, Devin?
I'm very happy.
Yeah.
It's been like 2 years.
Wait for school to start, and then we get behind again.
I know. We're so close.
Yeah, I just took away your happiness like that.
That's why I wanted to catch up right before school started, but we had a few delays, and now it's like we're going to catch up on my birthday, and it's just out of reach.
Happy birthday. We're going to be behind again. Happy birthday!
Half of the OAC's donations towards World Vision for this month of July will go to purchasing animals for families around the world, specifically to purchasing 10 goats, 10 sheep, 20 ducks, and 28 chickens.
And The Good Dinosaur.
Yeah. Those are all farm animals you can get in Stardew. Goat, sheep, ducks, chickens, and dinosaurs.
Yep.
That's not even a joke. So, yeah, I guess we don't need to talk about our final thoughts because we're going to find out what happens next time in the exciting conclusion, which is going to involve Jerry and World Vision and pirates.
I don't know about you, but it's really weird for me to think about the fact that Jerry's only been in 2 episodes.
You mean as an adult?
Oh, right, he's been in 3.
Silent Night, Mortal Coil, just part 2.
Yeah, just part 2. And then Memories of Jerry.
Yeah.
He's only been in 3 episodes.
And presumably in part 2 of The Boat People.
Yeah, but
imagine if he didn't show up.
I'm going to be so angry if Jerry doesn't show up. Oh my goodness.
Literally the worst thing.
Oh my goodness. I will be so angry.
So we'll talk about our final thoughts on that next time. Predictions for the second part. I don't think Jerry's going to show up.
I hate you, Devin. Jerry's gonna show up. He better show up.
So Jerry's apparently gonna like swing in on a vine and save them from pirates, and he's awesome. Jerry's gonna come in. He's like, I'm actually not in the Vietnam War. I'm a pirate. Surprise! Surprise! I'm Captain Jack Sparrow. It's all a commentary on the U.S.'s presence in the Vietnam War, and then he takes his father's ring and uses it to propose to Ricky's grandmother, and she's like, no, but I'll keep the ring, thanks. And then later, eventually it comes back to Wit.
She appears, and then she goes on a boat, and then she like throws it into the ocean like Titanic.
She's like, we need to find the sea sweep. And so she tricks everyone into this huge expedition where they go and try and find it. And she's telling her story to Wit. And then it turns out that she actually has Wit's ring all along. Surprise!
See, there was room. That's why she was like, I'm going to save most of it, or I'm going to sell most of it, but I'm saving some. It's just so she can throw it into the ocean.
Imagine how angry Wit's going to be when he finds out that there was room for Jerry on that door, and that's how Jerry died in the Vietnam War, because Ricky's grandma wouldn't let him on.
I just read a book.
It all makes sense now. That's how Jerry died.
Oh my gosh. I just read a book a couple weeks ago, and the dedication was, and I quote, everyone who knew there was enough room for Jack on that door.
I've still never seen
best
Titanic.
Dedication I've ever read. What?
I've never seen Titanic, still.
I haven't either. But it's so much fun to make jokes about.
Anyway, so, yeah, those are predictions for next time, I guess. We'll see how accurate those are. I really hope we're spot on.
I think Arlo's gonna get eaten by a dinosaur.
Probably. With really weird facial contours.
Yeah, and like a really big head.
Okay, so let's completely...
I think Arlo's gonna do drugs. They do drugs in The Good Dinosaur.
Really?
Yeah, they do. They get
that's not surprising,
high, and then they have this really trippy sequence, and I was watching, I was like, what?
Okay. Let's completely flip gears now and talk about Jerry in the Vietnam War. I'll just segue incredibly awkwardly into something totally different. We'll turn you all over to that right now. And now, Memories of Jerry, episode 352, written by Phil Lawler as well. And, I say written by Phil Lawler. As I learned from the guide, this is basically autobiography by Phil Lawler, it turns out, this episode. But we'll get to that at the end.
Wait, what?
Yeah, turns out basically this entire episode is the true story of Phil's childhood. Huh. But I'll go into the details at the end.
So Phil sucked at high jump?
Yes.
That's what you're telling me.
He did. He did
He's
that.
I might suck at high jump, but I'm good at writing things.
He said he did that same thing where he broke the bar in half.
How do you...
I don't know.
So, plastic, right?
They shouldn't be. The ones we used in school weren't plastic. They were metal.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, how... does he turn into the Hulk in midair? And he just breaks
I guess if you fully land on the bar at the right angle, maybe? I don't know. Anyways, what happens in this episode, Victoria?
It's made of diamond. It's unbreakable. And he's like, how are you breaking this? It's literally unbreakable, and you're breaking it
Besides putting the flop in Fosbury Flop, what happens in this episode?
So, in this episode, name...
Jason?
My head hurts. Okay, I've been up. I'm tired. I'm sick. I'm dying. Okay, so in this episode, Jason finds a letter that was...
Postcard.
A postcard that was addressed to him that he never got when he was younger, from Jerry, that was written right before Jerry died, back when he was in the war. And so then it has, all these, in-jokes. It has...
Yeah.
Between them.
It was basically if I went to war and wrote a letter to Victoria. This is what it would sound like.
And then someone else tried it, and then I read it.
Try not to paint the whale, Victoria.
It has all these inside jokes, and Jason reads it to Connie, and like a jerk, he keeps on laughing. He's like, oh, Fosbury Flop, good one, bro. And then Connie's like, what's wrong with you?
Why won't anyone tell me anything?
Yeah, and then Jason is like, hey, Connie, why are you laughing at my incredibly hilarious letter? And Connie's like, 'cause I don't know what you're talking about. Tell me what you're talking about. And he's like, well, if you insist. He was totally going to do it anyway.
It's kind of the opposite of that, honestly. Which I do actually like that. Connie's like, as soon as Jason starts reminiscing about the cast.
She pulls up a chair and she's like, well...
Connie's just sitting here, just snuggles up on a beanbag chair in story receptive mode because she's so used to wit.
But to quote her, there's a story here. I know you would occur.
Yeah, I like that, because Jason is, all taken aback, what do you mean I have a whole story to tell? I'm not my father. But then...
He, pulls out a script, and he's like, what do you mean I have a story to tell? I only wrote this book
I was born a papa to a pond with a squeegee in my hand. I like it, because Jason is, confused when Connie's like, tell me the story. But as soon as he's like, okay, he launches right into it, and he already has, descriptive flourishes and little quips.
I bet he has, little props that he uses.
It's perfectly scripted.
And when he says Canada, he pulls out, a little flag, and he waves it.
It was perfectly scripted, and he already had, all the little, embellishments of language and everything. It was all very pre-prepared.
Yeah. When he mentions Plato, and he's like, Plato, that's a name from the past, and Connie's like, yeah, the distant past. Every time Every time I hear that line, I think of the 150% off thing where they're talking about Ray's birthday, and he's like, Nostradamus? And he says, like, someone we know. And I just think of that, and it just makes me laugh really hard.
I don't know why that's what that reminds you of, but that's really funny.
I don't, it's just, like, someone we know, and they just say, like, a really old, like,
Nostradamus?
I don't know why. Anyway, so then, Jason launches into this story about him and Jason growing up,
and Jerry.
Then Jason, like, Jerry.
It's like the RT podcast. Jason and Jerry.
He went off to war, and about how lots of people were, like, deserting the army and going to Canada so they wouldn't have to get, like...
Well, draft dodging.
Draft dodging to Canada. And then him and Jason go camping, and then a friend of his, Plato, turns up, and he's like, hey, come to Canada with me. And then Jerry's like, no. And that's it, basically.
Yeah. So now that I've finally heard part 1 of the Boat People, I'm really excited to find out more in part 2 about what happened to Jerry in Vietnam, because we know nothing between the end of this episode and the date that he died. We know nothing that happened over there. I really liked how this episode...
You know he wrote a letter.
Because this episode...
That's it.
Yeah, but it doesn't say anything about what happened to him.
Yeah, I know.
I like how this episode starts out, because it's like, Connie's getting Mere Christianity off the shelf, and it slides aside, and Jason's like, booga booga, out of the...
I always think of, like, okay, I will bet you, like, $50, they based that off of the rooms at Focus, where they have, like, the sliding shelves. I don't think so. And...
The archive room is what you're talking about, where you have shelves, and they have handles so you can roll them back and forth.
Yeah. Because I bet people accidentally, like, sneak up on other people all the time there.
Or crush them in the walls.
Yeah, that too.
Probably not. Probably just the fact that sliding bookcases are a common trope in media.
Jason's like, I'm here!
Anyways, I really like how when he comes out, like, they give this not-so-subtle exposition for the sake of people who don't know / forgot that Whit's office has a sliding bookcase that hides the computer room. Because he, like, comes out and she's like, oh, Jason, you scared me so much, I forgot that bookcase slides out from the wall and completely hides the computer room behind. And he's like, yes, Connie, it does indeed slide that bookcase.
And she's like, when you pull out the book to the battle by C.S. Lewis, and then Mabel's behind there.
Battle.
And remember that entire thing with Blackguard and Richard Maxwell in album 5? I mean...
on stale in Christian bookstores
everywhere. A couple of years after I became a Christian, and I just... Oh, that was so crazy. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And Jason's like, I wasn't there for any of that.
So, I am honestly really surprised and kind of disappointed in Whit that after all of these decades, he still never showed that postcard to Jason. Because I get why he didn't do it at the time, but that was, like I said, that was decades ago.
Someone could make the argument that he forgot about it.
That's my only explanation.
I mean, it seems like something that'd be a little bit hard to forget about.
Yeah. I mean, admittedly, he has...
kept it.
Yeah. But he never opens the book, so maybe he forgot it was inside?
I love Jerry's theory for why the letter's inside, but I will propose an alternate theory. You know how Whit and Jenny always talk about, like, books and stuff like that all the time, and, like, what their opinions on different books? What if Whit read a book, and then Jenny's like, hey, should I read it? And he's like, oh my gosh, this book is so awful. I hate this book so much. It's so bad. And then they open the door, and then... So he already hated it before.
Okay, so you're not proposing much different then, except for the fact that he already hated the book.
Yeah.
Still the same mechanism of getting the postcard inside the book. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
but no, it makes sense if he never told Jason about it. What if he had, like, the book in a different place and you just didn't like the book or something, and then Jana picked up a letter and she was really young. She's like, what's this? Even though she would have not been super young at the time.
She would have been older than Jason.
Book. I don't know where it's going with that. Ignore me.
That's okay.
The episode works as it is.
So, we cut back to the past. We see Jason trying to do high jump. Good job, coach. Compare the kid you're booting from the team to his more talented older brother. That'll soften the blow and not create any emotional developmental scarring.
Hey, Jason, I relate to you.
I'm sorry. There's lots of things that you're better at than me. I was really surprised the first time that I heard about the Fosbury flop somewhere outside of AIO and realized it was actually a real thing. And then I was even more surprised.
At school for me.
What?
At KE, we had to do high jump. And we'd just start doing it like a little after I listened to this episode. And I was like, hey, Fosbury flop! Because that's what we had to do in high jump.
Yeah, I was even more surprised when I realized it wasn't some obscure or advanced technique. It's literally just the regular high jump where you do the weird backwards back arching thing. Like, it's just a regular high jump.
I suck at high jump. I would always knock the bar off.
But at least you didn't break it.
Yeah. I remember listening to it as a kid, and I was like, how did you break it?
Maybe they were just like bamboo or something down there. It was the 70s, who knows?
They actually were really poor as a school, so they just grabbed like a twig from the woods.
Yeah, they just snapped it off a tree.
Yeah.
Long weeping willow branch. Shout out to one of the few times Canada is mentioned on Adventures in Odyssey. One day...
I love how they like demonize Canada.
I know!
In this episode. They're like, oh, there's Canada, the evil place where evil people go. Don't go to Canada, Jerry. That's where all the demons are.
I know, at least fortunately, in terms of episodes that involve escaping to Canada, I feel like this one is counterbalanced by the Underground Railroad, where the entire goal is to escape to Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, one day we'll have an episode, or a character, or just something, maybe, please. We don't got a lot. We know Oscar Peterson.
I want them to, like, go have an OAC episode where they're like, we're going to a far-off land, and they're like, ooh, India? Nope. Asia? Nope. England? No. Canada.
What state is that in? Yeah, I mean, we know Oscar Peterson has relatives here, and he visits them in Our Best Vacation Ever. It's where the What's-Their-Faces went on vacation to Vancouver. In fact, shout out. Came here when Jason, the Merriweathers, Jason was house-sitting for them in Album 38 during Novacom when he was in Alaska, because they were in Vancouver. And a few other places here and there. Saskatchewan is where the Parker's GPS thought that they lived after Matthew messed with it in the Inspiration Station Part 1. Oh, and Quilt Factories in New Brunswick is where Alex's maternal grandmother went to visit in Relatively Annoying in Album 39.
How do you remember all of this?
I remember every time Canada is mentioned on this show, Victoria, because I can count them on one hand. That was 5.
That's so weird. They're so obscure.
Oh, it was 6.
These are all like one-lines.
I know.
One line.
But I hold on to them. I'm like, they mentioned...
hundreds of episodes apart from each other. I was like,
they mentioned New Brunswick. It's literally the most obscure of all Canadian provinces.
Mention British Columbia.
Vancouver. They went to Vancouver.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But yeah, literally, because someone was talking about New Brunswick recently, and I was like, the only things I know about New Brunswick are its capital city and that they have the quilt factories that Alex's grandmother visited in Relatively Annoying. Those are the only things I know about New Brunswick. It's the most obscure province in the country, I think. Anyways, yeah, Canada is in this episode. Sort of. I also like how Whit apparently asks his kids to go specimen collecting for him everywhere that they go.
That's so weird.
I don't even know what Whit's... Like, why is he doing original primary research for everything in the encyclopedia? Or is he apparently, like... I don't get it.
He's rich enough to travel to all those places.
But is he at this point? No,
he's not.
I really don't think that's how you write an encyclopedia, and it really begs a lot of questions about how Whit started UPF. Because honestly...
He's not, because he couldn't afford to do jack for the majority of Silent Night and Great Expectations.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
And now he's like the richest man in the world, basically.
Like, based on the snippets that we've heard here and there about the early days of UPF, I don't get it. He owns a publishing company centered around an encyclopedia he created, which means he's not grandfathering in new editions of an older series like Encyclopedia Britannica or anything. So, did he form UPF first and then spend years on creating this encyclopedia so he had anything to print? which would be weird if he printed
anything. I feel
anything.
like he would have found stuff first.
It would be weird if he printed stuff before that, because the encyclopedia is named after the company. Or did he create an entire encyclopedia set and then found a publishing company just to publish that, and then it grew from there? Because he also...
I feel like he would have written the book and then founded the publishing company.
But surely that's not how you make encyclopedias, by doing your own research and stuff.
This man doesn't have a proper age, Devin. He doesn't care about how things work.
Also, in What Are We Going to Do About Halloween, he also talks about, like, I have some books up in the library from when I was doing when I was doing research for an encyclopedia I was writing, he says.
I don't know. I don't know.
I find it...
If you don't know, I probably don't know.
It also just made me wonder then how people make encyclopedias, because I don't know. I feel like that's more,
Google it.
That's more your wheelhouse, sort of.
Me? Well...
Yeah.
Not
yet.
Not yet.
It's funny to me to think that it's fairly statistically likely that Plato eventually either ended up in Nelson or in Vancouver Island after he dodged the draft.
He would have ended up in Nelson.
Like, think about it. We could live minutes from Plato.
Nelson is more than minutes away, especially for you. You're in Vancouver.
Well, I know,
right
but
now.
I still live in Castlegar.
I drove through Nelson today.
And yeah, it's still minutes. It's 40 minutes, but that's not that many minutes. 40 minutes.
I saw this
40
guy
minutes
in
would only
Nelson
get me
today just
halfway across the
standing
city
on
here.
On the street, like on the side of the street, and he had like a top hat on, and there were like pigeon feathers sticking out of it at odd angles, but like not normal. It was like a hat, and then it just had like feathers going out the top, like the very middle of the hat. And I looked over and I was like, what is that? And I poked my dad because he was driving, and I was like, did you just see that? And he was like, just keep your eyes on the front of the road.
That was either Uemine Shu or Plato. There are no other options.
Maybe both. Maybe Plato-ish.
Anyways. Wow, we are just all over the place today. I really wish that I could comment more profoundly on the actual Vietnam-related stuff in this episode, but I honestly really know virtually nothing about that war.
I don't know anything about it either.
Canada, obviously, we didn't participate in it, which is why people ran here to escape the draft, which I always find interesting because it's a contrary motion to what happened in World War II, where...
And World War I.
Sorry?
And World War I.
Oh, was it both of them? Where for most of the war, well, yeah, for both of them, for most of the time, the U.S. wasn't involved, but Canada was the whole time, and so instead of draft...
The U.S. joined both wars at, like, the very
halfway
end.
point.
They were kind of, like, the final thing that, like, pushed the odds in our favor.
Yeah, but Canada was in both of them the whole time, and so instead of draft dodging to Canada, for both of those wars, we got Americans who draft dove into the country to join the Canadian military because they really wanted to fight in the war, but the U.S. wasn't, and so they ran away to Canada to join the army and fight. So it's the opposite in Vietnam. I've always found that fascinating.
Because, like, England's a mommy, and we have to do what mommy says.
Well, in World War I. In World War II, we made our own choice.
Uh-huh. I mean, like, in World War I, we weren't even on the council.
Yeah, I know.
Of, like, things going on, but we were in World War II. We actually had, like, a say in things at the end when the treaty was made up. Like, the treaty to Versailles, Canada had no say in that. They were just, like, sitting in the waiting chair outside the office while all the adults talked, basically.
World War I, we got automatically joined with England because we were still practically England at that point. But World War II, we made our own decision and still decided in the first week of the war to join because it was the right thing to do. Anyways, I want to know how Plato found a cabin out on Lake Michigan that he visited once when he was in grade 4 and he's, like, now in college.
Maybe it's a fond memory?
Yeah, but he was like... Oh, yeah, I remember the cabin. Like, it seems like it's, like, barely, like, a fuzzy memory for him, and yet he still found it. Lake Michigan is very large.
I think I would remember something
The Great
like
Lakes
that.
are very large, Victoria. It would be difficult, I imagine.
Well, it would probably be really cool. Like, apparently, I don't know, I'm guessing that Plato doesn't have, like, the most stable of...
Memories?
Like, growing up. Like, so, like, to see, like,
Probably
a
both.
really... normal well-rounded family hanging out, that's probably like a big deal.
That's fair.
So he'd remember it. Plus, Jerry probably invited him to like come out there with him a bunch of times, and Plato was like, "Nah, man, gotta smoke my peace pipe. See y'all later."
Probably. Man, our border security was really lax even back then. Because even besides the draft dodging, where you're intentionally trying to sneak into the country, Jason asked earlier if he and Jerry could cross the lake into Canada, and Jerry's like, sure, why not? Let's illegally cross the border into another country and come back. It's fine. Not a big deal.
I bet they're just like waving to the border people as they like go by on the canoe, and the border guys are like, hi!
They have the
they seem nice.
Audacity to complain about their own border security when they're doing things like this.
And they're like, hey, I feel like we're supposed to be doing something right now. Well, I can't remember what it is, though. Have a nice day!
So, to talk about like the actual theme of the episode here, as someone who is only familiar with the Vietnam War through inference from popular media and such, including AIOO, I've never been entirely clear as to this, like, the root source of all the controversy. Like, I get it was like, we should fight the war, we shouldn't fight the war. The Price of Freedom is one of the first reviews.
I think it was that, like, they fought over people killing people who shouldn't have died or something like that, or not saving certain people.
Or if it was like, hey,
but that's from the
like
Price
they make it
War,
sound
so...
like some people are like, we need to fight the communists, and other people are like, hey, it's none of our business. Also, the soldiers are being really bad people, so we shouldn't be over there. The Price of Freedom is one of the first reviews we ever did on this podcast, and I talked about how it was interesting how grayly the war was treated in that episode. The show, Adventures in Odyssey in general, obviously, being made by Focus on the Family, is usually pretty directly right-wing, conservative, Republican aligned when it comes to political matters. And it's not often, in my opinion, that there's a lot of give and take. Even though the show...
They do have it in What Are We Gonna Do About Halloween, though.
That's true.
For the most part.
That's true. We've talked about that in October.
They tried to do it with Ties That Bind, but they kind of failed
miserably.
But we're not going to get into that because we talk about it too much.
Even though the show always seems to land on the consensus that the war was better than not, it always treats it with the idea that there is a balance, even if it doesn't really go into it much. Like, even at the end of The Price of Freedom, Chris acknowledges in the rap that, unlike many other wars in the Bible and in general history, there's no easy answer to a situation like Vietnam, and arguments can be made both ways. So I appreciate that even though Jerry's clearly set in his choices, and he doesn't seem very interested in wavering on them, since he's already volunteered and he's kind of already made his bed, now he needs to sleep in it, they clearly show like he's masking self-doubts and concerns. Because when it comes to talking to Plato, he gives off all this empty bravado, dismissing his bilge, without answering any of the actual counters to Plato's remarks about the morality. Like, Plato's like, you're doing all these wrong things, and this is bad, and people are doing bad things, and Jerry's like, Jerry never actually counters any of his stuff, he just dismisses it, but he does it like, all this empty bravado, and then when he's finally alone with God near the end of the episode, he talks about how he really has to think things over very deeply and carefully, like he said, deeply and truly questioning his convictions for the first time ever, which is great. Because regardless of your stance on an important issue, it is always best to question and question and question and self-examine and pray and study and question and don't take your assumptions or preconceptions for granted. So even though Jerry stood a strong face to people trying to argue with him, he still internally pondered really deeply the spiritual and moral consequences of his choices, and that's great. And even though his mind didn't change in the end, he can now be truly confident in the choice that he made. The second interesting thing about that is he says that he feels that God was specifically telling him he needed to go, which is what really makes me curious about the second part of the boat people to find out what Jerry actually did during the war. Because the way I see it, this show has pointed out multiple times that it's unclear whether or not the war was right or not. So I don't see how the show would say, Jerry received a clear message from God to go because God was advocating for the whole war in general. The way they treat it makes me think that the only thing it could mean then is that God was saying specifically, Jerry Whittaker, I want you to go to Vietnam. Which means that God had a specific reason that he wanted Jerry Whittaker specifically, to go to Vietnam. So I'm hoping that in part 2 of the Boat People, we'll learn what happened to him and learn what that specific reason was that God wanted him there. Because it may have to do with the story.
Tilt your camera down. And that's better. I think that Jerry saved Arlo's family's lives.
I'm not sure how. I assume so. I thought he's going to swing in on a rope and he's going to kick all the pirates' butts.
I like to think that, like, they went across the canoe to Canada, and then they were, like, on their way back, and they were, like, in the middle of the lake. And then Jason was like, hey, Jerry, you know how Dad wants all these rocks? And Jerry's like, yeah. And then Jason just, like, throws him overboard like in Titanic with the necklace.
I thought you were going to say, yeah, and he turns around, and the canoe is sinking because the entire canoe is full of rocks for wind.
We got too many rocks. We're sinking. Tilt your camera down more. It's like you're trying to hide. What do you have to hide, Devin?
What I have to hide is this goof alert from the guide.
Oh, nice transition!
In Memories of Jerry, young brothers Jason and Jerry Whittaker are talking about the cabin on Lake Michigan. Jason asks Jerry if they can go across the lake into Canada. Later, a character actually does cross the lake into Canada. Unfortunately for us, Lake Michigan doesn't border Canada. According to AIOO Wiki, it's actually the only Great Lake that doesn't border Canada. But... I know.
It's like 80, you have a 1 in 5 chance to get it right, and you got it wrong.
But there is a channel that connects Lake Michigan and Huron, and then you could go through that and then get to Canada.
Oh, okay.
That's why it's Homes, right? Homes. Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior.
Yeah. I can never remember them. I had an expression like when I was younger, but I can't remember what it is.
I was going to say deepest freshwater, but no, that is Lake Baikal. And the highest freshwater lake is Lake Titicaca.
Why do you know this?
Carmen Sandiego in that case specifically.
Oh, well, all right then.
Yeah. There's more from the guide as well. Behind the scenes, Memories of Jerry. Dave Lipson played the coach in Memories of Jerry. Dave also played Coach Fred Zachary in several early Odyssey episodes, which is obvious in retrospect thinking about the coach's voice. Yeah, it's totally Fred Zachary.
I always thought he was actually like Fred Zachary.
He's just really old. He's the secret ageless character. It's not Wit. It's actually Coach Zachary.
Okay, do you think Coach Zachary's gonna appear on one of the new episodes?
Probably.
I wouldn't put it.
He's gonna show up at Penny Wooten's wedding. He's gonna be the one who marries them. The person like doing the wedding, like marrying that's what I was saying. Off. Yeah, and he's like, I want to marry marriage is what brings us together to today.
Wu-Tang and Penny Bassett.
Sound bites. TJ Lowther plays young Jason. TJ had appeared in the two movies A Perfect World, 1993, with Kevin Costner and Clint Eastwood, and Mad Love, 1995, with Drew Barrymore and Chris O'Donnell. He additionally appeared in the television movie One Christmas, 1994, with Katharine Hepburn. TJ was a huge Adventures in Odyssey fan and was very excited at the chance to appear on the program.
Oh man, can you imagine like this little kid talking with Clint Eastwood about Adventures in Odyssey? That's so adorable.
Kevin Costner, they're just talking about Adventures in Odyssey and berating him for Waterworld.
Do you think that Eugene and Katrina are ever gonna get married? Oh my gosh.
And Clint Eastwood is like last thing from the guide, and this is the one I was referencing at the beginning. Oh, blow your mind, Victoria.
Okay,
my take.
I'm ready.
Phil Lawler. We'd never done a story about Whit's older son before before Memories of Jerry. We'd seen him in The Mortal Coil, album 16, but never really explored a story. There's a lot of me embodied in Jason. I was nicknamed the Judge when I was small because I didn't smile until I was 2 years old. My older brother was the first one to make me laugh. My whole high jump bar incident actually happened to me. Also, I never really liked camping outside if there was a cabin readily available. My uncle was a languages specialist, just like Jerry. I was also Jason's age when the war in Vietnam was raging and got caught up in a riot on a university campus, and knew a few fellas who lost their lives in Southeast Asia. Perhaps more than any other Odyssey episode I've written, this one truly followed the old adage, write what you know. So it turns out that young Jason is actually Phil's self-insert OC all along.
Huh.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
I guess I knew it, but I didn't remember. It's been a long time since I read through the whole guide unabridgedly. Yeah, literally everything in this episode and every detail they give about Jason was Phil.
Huh.
Yeah.
What?
I told you. When at the beginning I was like, written by Phil Lawler, or more autobiographed by Phil Lawler. Autobiographed by Phil Lawler, more accurately. So yeah, it was just his self-insert.
So is he like, I need to write an episode about young Jason. I don't know what to write.
I can't believe Jason's a Mary Sue.
Hello, my name is Jason Darkness Dementia Ravenway. I saw Plato. I put my middle finger up at him.
Some people tell me I look like my brother Jerry. So.
Wait.
No, we don't have to parody the whole thing, Victoria.
I'm also a Whittaker. But I never went to Scotland.
So, final thoughts.
Where's the part about Phil Lawler making them go on an expedition and throwing a locket into the ocean? Like a troll. Phil's a troll. Can we both agree on that?
That is true.
I feel like all the writers at AIOO are trolls.
Final thoughts on the episode, Victoria.
This is one of my favorite episodes of Odyssey. I really love Jerry. I'm so excited that we're going to get more Jerry because he's great, and it's weird to think that he's only been in a couple episodes because he's one of those characters in the show that's talked about more than he actually appears. And know what else is weird to think about? I think Richard Maxwell might have become one of those characters too, who's talked about more than he appears. But
fun fact about Jerry Whittaker. One of the first albums that we ever got was album 7. And at the time, we didn't know who Jerry Whittaker was. And so in the episode, The Very Best of Friends, when Whit takes Donna to the graveyard and he's telling this story about his son named Jerry who didn't do his math homework, I thought this was actually a story about Jason, but he was just changing his name to protect the innocent. Until the end of it, when Donna's like, is Jerry at the graveyard too?
Aww.
And I was like, no, it's Jason. Whit only has one son. And then Whit's like, I have some catching up to do as well. And I was like, wait, what? So that was how I learned that Whit had a son named Jerry.
I murdered my son because he didn't do his math homework.
Exactly. Yeah, anyways, back to you. Sorry.
Just everything in this episode's so good. This episode's just so good. And I love Plato as a foil to Jerry. Because you can kind of... I don't know. It's hard to put into words why I love this episode so much. I'm sorry I haven't talked a lot in this episode.
Okay, I had a really long rambly paragraph.
Whenever I try to talk, I can't stop coughing.
Yeah.
So it's just better if I don't talk a lot. This episode has such good characterization, and it gets through so much information in such little time. It's a lot like The Price of Freedom in that way, because in The Price of Freedom, we have a lot of characters who are just one-shot characters, and we know so much about them by the end of it, and they're just really well-rounded characters, and they even go through some development in the course of 20 minutes, which is impressive. But for a series like Odyssey, you always go through character development in 20 minutes, and that's kind of nice. I wish life worked that way. And so you're laughing because you know I'm right. And we get the same thing with this episode, so that's really nice to see. We get to see Jerry's relationship with Plato. We know where they came from, what they are, and it's always nice to see background on the Whittakers, especially like, Jason, because we don't get to really see that much of Jason when he's little. We don't get to see that much of Whit's kids when they're younger, except for this and Silent Night, and we just don't get to see them at all in Great Expectations.
That's true.
So, yeah, this episode and Silent Night are, like, the only times we ever get to see, like, little Whittaker babies. It's like Muppet Babies, but with the Whittakers, and you're like, oh, I need more of this in my life. But then Muppet Babies gets canceled because no one liked it, and I'm like, but I like the young Whittaker, so why can't this be a thing?
And it had Katie Lee in it. It's Ralph. Baby Ralph.
Yeah, and I think it had Will Ryan, too.
Probably. It wasn't until, like...
Or it might have been Walker.
Most of the way through this episode that it suddenly occurred to me that it's funny that while we're doing this episode for our year of Whit, that Whit doesn't actually appear in this episode whatsoever. Not even in the flashback at any point.
Yeah,
which
but
makes sense.
Has to do with his life.
It makes sense because, you know...
Whit can appear. He could.
They didn't have a voice for him.
He could have appeared in flashback, but he's not necessary in this episode.
Yeah.
Like, if he appeared in the flashback, it would have been his younger voice.
Yeah, they could have put in Jimbo.
Mm-hmm. I have a question about Great Expectations.
Yes.
I don't know if you can answer it because you haven't heard it in a while, probably. But when he's using that voice right before he meets Emily for the last time, and it's kind of like, sounds like Andre, was that actually his young voice actor just kind of doing an older voice?
I think it might be Jim Custer. So, but I don't remember entirely.
Because it kind of sounded like the younger voice actor trying to do, like,
I think I remember that that's Andre. What it is, but I could be wrong because it's been a while.
Because I was like, there's no way Andre can do this voice. Even though he's a good actor, I just don't think it's him.
Yeah.
So, anyway, 5 out of 5.
And for me, yeah, I mean, like I said, I can't really comment on, like, the philosophical stuff about the war because I know nothing about it. Because we don't teach people about it here because we weren't involved in it whatsoever. And, I mean, I guess we learn about other wars we weren't involved in, like the American Revolution and Civil War and the French Revolution and the British Civil War and all that. But this just wasn't, whatever. I can comment on the more general philosophical principles, which I just did, and how I really appreciate how they showed Jerry, like, even though he's, like, putting up this bold face against other people, that he's like, I'm standing my ground on my ideology because I kind of have to, because I don't want to second guess. He's like, I chose this, and I can't back out of it now, and so I'm scared to second guess myself because I don't want to come to the conclusion that I'm wrong and then be stuck with that. I feel like that's kind of what's going on with him. He's like, I don't want to come to the realization that I was wrong about what I chose. And so it's better for me to just kind of purposefully, blindly keep on going into this. But then finally, through Plato's persistence, he's like, okay, now I need to actually, like, pray and sit and question and figure out what I'm going to do. Is this the right choice? I need to question this and maybe everything I've ever known. And that's what he does. And he comes out with the same decision, but now it's his decision, not a decision that was made by his upbringing or his parents or by societal pressures or anything else acting on him. He has now made this choice, both eyes open, fully aware, which is really important. And I very much appreciate that as a general principle. I also love that we got young Jerry, we got young Jason, we got their relationship together, which we've never seen anywhere else before.
I was just going to say that. I love the dynamic between Jason and Jerry. It's so adorable. I wish we got a Jerry-Jana episode because I want to see how they interact.
We get very few brother-brother interactions in this show from, like, young people. I mean, most sibling pairs in this show are boy and girl, and slightly lesser degree we'll get interactions of, like, girl and girl, like the Robin and Melanie.
With, like, Camilla and
Olivia. I was going to say Camilla and Olivia, Robin and Melanie, and even Erica and Haley Clark.
Marvin and Antoine.
That is the other one I was going to say.
Marvin and Xavier.
The other one I was going to say was Marvin and Xavier, and we get this nice, like, a few...
Antoine's in, like, one episode, and then he's just kicked to the curb. He's in one episode.
He wasn't in The Toy Man, if that's what you're thinking of.
Was he?
No, that was Xavier.
Oh, I always thought he was. No. Oh, never mind.
Okay,
Antoine's not in any episode. Well then.
Yeah. So, yeah, because I was thinking of that when...
Oh, we get the twins who lived with Nick and Lisa.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Jessica and Janelle. But yeah, the only other one I was really thinking of in my mind was you get kind of a little bit of dynamic between Marvin and Xavier and talking about, like, the way Marvin looks up to him for different things and stuff like that.
Wooten and Wellington.
Well, I said as kids. I said as young people.
Fine.
Because then we could also talk about, like,
Wooten and Wellington are adorable, though.
Blackguards.
He used to spray the maids and then blame it on Wooten. Oh my god.
In terms of young child characters, we don't get to see a lot of brother-brother interaction.
I love Wellington so much.
So this was nice, especially since it was Jason and Jerry. And it was cool to hear more about this era of What's Life that we very rarely hear about. Mm-hmm. Get some of the more confusing, vague details about the encyclopedia portion of What's Life. And
you're just so confused about the encyclopedia.
It was good.
I don't blame you.
It's good overall. I like it. And Canada's mentioned in it, which is exciting.
You're like 5 points for Canada. Yeah. 5 out of 5.
Mexico gets a bunch of mentions, and they got a whole exciting action-adventure two-parter.
That's because they speak Spanish.
The only scene that takes place in...
I was going to say, that's because they speak Mexican. That's not a thing.
The only scene that we get is, I think there's one scene at the end of the Underground Railroad that takes place, like, in Canada.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I really like that, since I'm just going to say it, really offhanded comment, non sequitur, because we're probably never going to review Underground Railroad. But
we'll review everything eventually.
I really like that one lady who, like, gets the son as the slave, and then she, like, sends him off in the box. Mm-hmm. Like, I love her so much. She's amazing. Anyway, that didn't have anything to do with anything, but, yeah.
So,
just so you all know.
This episode, I'm going to give it 4.9. I don't know. I feel like
the point went off for?
I can't think of anything specific, but I feel like there could have been a little more to bump it up. Like, it's not quite a 5. It's still very good.
Okay, that's fair enough. It's just you don't know what it is. Yeah. But yeah. Okay,
nothing specifically wrong, but there could be more to elevate it, I guess.
Yeah. I rated episodes like that before.
Yeah. So, next time, we are doing another What If.
I'm excited for this one.
What if are we doing about? Idea. We talked about it when you came up with the idea in the middle of an episode a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I actually came up with the idea a couple days before, but I forgot to tell you, and I knew if I didn't tell you then, I would have forgotten.
Touché.
So this one is, what if Katrina never became a Christian? Has more ramifications than you might think. We never do what ifs if they don't have enough ramifications.
Or if they're too similar to previous ones. Because there's lots of different ways you could arrive at the effect of Whit never.
What was the one I said to you? What if Jerry didn't die?
Yeah.
And then you said that would be too similar to what if
the effect
did die or something like that?
Yeah, because the effect is basically, because it's confusing in the show whether there's conflicting information whether or not they were living in Odyssey or in Chicago, presumably Chicago when Jerry died. But it seems like, if they lived in Odyssey, not much would change. If they lived in Chicago, then I think they say, like, oh, we moved to Odyssey after Jerry died. So then Whit never moved to Odyssey, and so he wouldn't have had any of those effects. It would basically be the same as the first What If, which is what if Whit died in World War II, where the primary effector of that What If is basically Whit's not in the show. So it's too similar in effect, I think.
It makes sense.
But this one should be interesting.
What if Katrina never became a Christian?
Yeah, because...
Think about what you think we're going to say. And we might actually say some of those things, and you'll be like, oh, I was right.
Yeah. Or think of the things, and then we don't say them, and then you can berate us in the comments.
Yeah. Yeah, I hate you too. You never mentioned the one thing.
Thumbs down. Blocked. Flagged. DMCA strike. So, until then, thank you for joining us on our side of the YouTube. I have been Devin Francis, also known as Leonard Meltzner.
And I can't believe what a troll the lady is in the Titanic. You tell them to come out and help you find the necklace, and you have the necklace the whole time. You just got them there to listen to your story. What is wrong with you?
Victoria found out about this between the filming of the first part and the second part of this episode.
I didn't know about that.
Goodbye.
Bye.